Just learning that the Biden administration has been flying hundreds of unaccompanied migrant kids into Tennessee in the middle of the night. The flights are being conducted without any involvement or knowledge from community or elected officials. No one knows what they're doing. No one knows what to do about it. A lot of small towns in Tennessee are being affected. Joining us this morning to talk more about this is Tennessee Senator and the author of the book, The Mind of the Conservative Woman, Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn, back with us on the show. Senator, nice to have you back on. Good morning.
Good to be with you, and thank you for continuing to talk about this issue that is happening with the illegal entrance into our country now being pushed around the country at taxpayer expense.
Senator, I want to talk about that, but I did read a press release that your office put out late yesterday on the big tech censorship that we've been seeing over the last year and a half, but particularly as it relates to the cover-up of the origins of the coronavirus. This virus may, in fact, have been developed by man's hand in a lab in Wuhan, China. You're calling for a full independent investigation. This is something that we've been calling for months and months here on the air. Take us through, how does something like this actually happen? How do we get to that point of getting a full independent investigation?
This is something that the World Health Organization should have stepped up to do, and they chose not to do it. And then they kind of fumbled with who was going to be allowed to participate in this. But bear in mind that Wuhan lab did not allow anyone into that lab for months and months and months. And we know that our diplomatic scientists back in 2018 had expressed concerns about what was going on at this lab. But of course, a year ago, when I was asking questions about what was transpiring in that lab and the possibility that this may have been a coronavirus and it may have been research on various coronaviruses and gain-of-function research, that was like, impossible. It came from a bat at the wet market.
Yeah, no, that's Senator, that's I'm wondering why you think the legacy media, okay, particularly MSNBC and CNN, why were they so concerned with covering for China and pushing that wet market story?
And then they became, it didn't necessarily begin in China.
Right.
So their story evolved. But here is the thing. When you look at this mainstream media, pardon me, that is such a participant with the left and with the DNC, they have an outcome that they need, whether it is policies, whether it is news stories, whether it is current events. They have a narrative that they are selling. They have an outcome, a desired outcome. So they're going to create the story that leads to the outcome that they desire. And this is what they have done with coronavirus. And the further we got into this, then it was, well, maybe it didn't really originate in China. Yeah. Maybe it did come from Europe. You started to hear all these other stories that would cast doubt and cause confusion. But here is what we do know. We know that over the past few decades, China has taken our jobs, our manufacturing jobs, and they have reeled companies in to become more dependent on them, to the point now that when it comes to antibiotics and vaccines and semiconductor chips and microprocessors and other components of our critical supply chain, we are dependent on China. That is what they want.
Right.
They have begun to build out their Belt and Road Initiative. They have begun to do debt diplomacy, especially in Africa. And they get these nations completely dependent on them. China is the largest holder of U.S. debt.
And Senator, I quickly, I want to talk about what's going on the border because we are tight on time. But I'll tell you what, this probably the biggest man-made disaster, certainly in modern human history. And the fact that people are now just waking up to, wait a second, where did this come from? It's shocking, and we've got to get an answer to this question. I don't care how we do it.
We do.
We have to get an answer to this question. Another question that we should get an answer to is, why are migrant kids being flown into the state of Tennessee in the middle of the night?
Rob, here is what the administration is doing. They've apprehended 500,000 illegal entrants. They are having to get them out of federal custody as fast as they can so that they can spin the story and build the narrative that the border is under control. And we've heard Mayorkas say the border is closed, which we know is not true. That is fantasy land. So what they are doing is in the middle of the night, they are flying these children, these individuals, to different parts of the country. Then they are putting them onto a bus. And then they're going to shelters or going to areas, and who knows where they go from there. But the thing is, this way the feds can transfer the cost to your local county for education, health care, child services, housing, and it is then up to the county and the state to pay for those costs.
Senator, we had former President Donald Trump on our air last night, Cortez and Pellegrino here on Newsmax, and he talked about the situation in Tennessee. Take a listen.
The worst people anywhere in this hemisphere in the world coming into this country unchecked, being released in our country. And yeah, they are. They're releasing people in Tennessee. That never happened with me.
Right.
That's why Tennessee likes me. But they're releasing them in areas that it just, I mean, it's horrible what's happening. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people.
Senator, about 30 seconds, but I just wanted to get your reaction to the former president's comments.
Well, the president is right. He had a border policy that works. The Biden border policy is broken. So now what are they doing? They are sending these children into areas like Chattanooga, Tennessee, into small communities where there may be a shelter or an empty building they can turn into a housing facility. Then these children are going on to their so-called sponsors, which may be drug traffickers, labor gang leaders, MS-13 gang leaders, or sex traffickers. It is a terrible life that these children are being subjected to. The U.S. federal government, via the taxpayer, is actually footing this bill. It needs to stop today.
Senator, so nice having you back on. That is Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn joining us. Good to see you again.